The transmission crackled through the bridge speakers of the USS Javelin, sounding like someone gargled a blender full of gravel and superiority. On screen, the face of arch-strategist Velthar of the Vortani Empire appeared, gleaming, scaled and smug enough to curdle milk. "Humans," he hissed, his mandibles twitching with the satisfaction of a predator lecturing prey. "We acknowledge your attempt to construct starships, truly charming. Your combustion-based propulsion is an inspiration to underdeveloped species galaxy-wide." Captain Mitch Tex Harrigan didn't even flinch. He leaned back in his command chair, legs sprawled like a guy watching a pre-game show with a beer in hand, and swirled his lukewarm coffee. "Aw shucks," he drawled. "You flatter us, lizard fella. We try real hard with what little brain juice we got. Took us a whole decade just to figure out which end of the ship was supposed to point forward." The bridge chuckled. Not fake military discipline chuckles, real ones. This was the Javelin after all. It wasn't a ship full of rules and starch. It was a ship full of the kind of people you picked after diplomacy failed. Seated at the tactical console was Gunnery Sergeant Diego Mendez, muscles, mustache, and a permanent chew of gum. The kind of guy who could load a railgun by glaring at it. Next to him, Engineering Chief Buttons Nguyen, a wiry woman with a caffeine addiction and 5 simultaneous conversations with the ship's AI. She didn't believe in manuals. She was the manual. Navigator Ari Patel ran the helm with jazz playing through one earbud and sarcasm always loading in the chamber. And then there was Coop, Lieutenant Cooper Reeves, sniper, scout, and the only man alive to have named a honey badger his emotional support animal. Technically against regs, but nobody was going to tell Coop to part with waffles. Velthar's image blinked as his cranial fins stiffened. "We will be conducting a demonstration of proper galactic power in the coming solar cycles. Your kind may observe. Perhaps you will learn something beyond how to inflate your own mythology." "Oh, we love learning," Tex nodded solemnly. "Why, just last week Buttons figured out how to make pancakes in the torpedo oven. Damn near revolutionary." "Please," Velthar sneered. "We detected your recent weapons tests, projectiles, metal slugs, kinetic force. Your methods are obsolete by tens of thousands of years. You cling to primitive warfare like a hatchling to an eggshell." Diego raised an eyebrow. "Man's really talking trash about bullets when his empire still uses ceremonial robes." Tex muted the transmission with a flick. "All right, team, you heard his scaled highness. We're primitive, outdated, cute little monkey folk with guns and grit. Thoughts?" "Is this the part where we act surprised?" Ari said, spinning in his chair. Buttons didn't look up from her console. "I give their energy shields 2 minutes once we let Waffles off the leash." Waffles, currently chewing on a piece of synthetic tubing in Coop's lap, growled like he knew he was being talked about. Tex stood, stretching. "Let's make sure we're locked, loaded, and looking like idiots. I want the fleet formation to look like a kindergarten drawing. I want our comms to sound like static. I want them laughing, because when they laugh, they stop watching their 6. Coop finished with a grin. The humans went quiet for a moment, just the soft hum of the Javelin's reactor and the faint chewing noises of a honey badger named Waffles. Tex tapped the screen again, bringing Velthar back mid-rant about aesthetics of proper fleet arrangement. "Well, shoot," Tex said, plastering on his best clueless yokel smile. "We'd be honored to come see y'all's fireworks display. Just try not to vaporize us on accident, you hear?" Velthar glared, his fins twitching. "You will stay in your designated observation zone, primitives." "Wouldn't dream of doing otherwise," Tex nodded. "Scout's honor." The transmission ended with an imperial musical sting that tried very hard to sound intimidating, and mostly just reminded Tex of an old video game boss fight. Diego gave a low whistle. "They have no idea, do they?" "Nope," Tex said. "And that's just how we like it." Waffles gave a low, guttural snort, which, if you asked Coop, was honey badger for soon, the Vortani flagship. Glorious Judgment lived up to its name if you liked your architecture with a side of fascist drama. Everything was chrome, spires, and the architectural equivalent of flexing in the mirror. Even the docking bay shimmered, with active plasma fields just in case the decor didn't scream, "We overcompensate." Captain Tex Harrigan stepped off the Javelin's shuttle with his usual laid-back swagger, flanked by his crew in what could only be described as diplomatic casual. Mendez still wore his utility vest. Buttons had a wrench tucked behind her ear, and Coop brought waffles, in a baby carrier, because regulations hadn't explicitly said not to. A squad of Vortani honor guards stood at attention, armored in shimmering violet plates, each holding a staff that crackled ominously. Their leader, Sub-Executor Crix, was a walking lizard, with a neck longer than his people's list of conquests and a gaze like he was already carving victory symbols on his wall. "Welcome," Crix said, each word oozing through clenched fangs. "We are humbled by your presence aboard our ship." Tex grinned. "You know, we're always happy to bring a little interstellar backwoods charm to fancy get-togethers." Buttons coughed to hide a laugh. Crix didn't even blink. They were escorted through halls lined with living metal that shifted color as they walked. Decorative drones hovered nearby, recording the humans for posterity or propaganda. "Please observe," Crix said as they entered a massive amphitheater with a central platform surrounded by force field columns. "This is one of our lesser demonstration chambers for small-scale weapon trials." He gestured, and a drone floated into the center, projecting a target drone made of dense alloy. A Vortani warrior stepped forward with ceremonial flair and fired a sleek, glowing rifle. The energy bolt sizzled through the air and detonated the target in a flare of green fire. Tex gave an approving whistle. "Well, butter my biscuits, that's a light show." Mendez leaned over and whispered, "That thing couldn't pierce a tin can if it had to go through a car door first." "Shh," Tex said with mock seriousness. "We're observing, diplomatically." Crix turned to them. "This weapon is capable of atomizing unshielded matter within microseconds." "Impressive, yes?" Tex nodded solemnly. "Sure is. Kind of reminds me of a bug zapper back home. Only, you know, for bugs with armor and bad attitudes." Crix frowned, but continued. "Observe now the superiority of our shielding systems." Another Vortani raised a crystalline armlet. With a hiss, a transparent blue dome enveloped him. Seconds later, an automated turret fired a barrage of plasma bolts directly at the shield, which shimmered but held. This field can resist continuous assault from starfighter-grade plasma. It adjusts its frequency hundreds of times per second. "Like a chameleon at a disco," Ari muttered under his breath. Buttons leaned in toward the shield with mock curiosity. "So it's tuned to plasma frequency specifically?" Crix turned his reptilian head. "Indeed. And laser harmonics, ionic, disruption, and particle wave emissions. Nothing within conventional warfare has breached it in 5 decades. Huh." Buttons nodded thoughtfully. "That's neat." Tex scratched his chin. "Back on Earth we had this old car, the 1992 Ford Taurus. Thing was indestructible too. Except when it rained. Then the wiper shorted out and the door locked itself shut. Tragic, really." Crix made a sound halfway between a sigh and a growl. "Your cultural analogies are difficult to parse." Tex smiled. "We get that a lot." Waffles chose that moment to growl low and ominous, his tiny badger frame vibrating like a furry buzzsaw in Coop's arms. Crix's eyes flicked down. "Is that a companion animal?" "This?" Coop asked, gently stroking Waffles' head. "He's just a morale booster. ESA certified. Plus he can smell fear." Crix blinked. "Fear?" Buttons nodded. "Oh yeah, among other things. He once tore a ventilation shaft open to get at a leaking power cell. Thought it was a weasel. We're still not sure if it wasn't a weasel, to be honest." Crix looked like he was regretting inviting them. The Vortani moved on, eager to return the conversation to things that glowed and exploded. They were shown gravitic anchors, cloaking emitters, and a zero-point energy core that hummed like a sanctimonious monk with an ego problem. The humans, for their part, nodded at everything, asked innocent questions like, "What happens if it overheats?" and "Does the shielding get lag from physical projectiles?" and made notes on tiny pads they never looked at twice. By the time the tour ended, Crix was visibly puffed with pride. You see, primitive or not, we have much to teach. Tex offered a firm handshake that the Vortani awkwardly returned, with a cold three-fingered clasp. Oh, absolutely, Tex said. We're like kindergartners here, but you know what they say about kindergartners. Crix squinted. What? Tex leaned in with a conspiratorial wink. They bite. As they boarded their shuttle, Tex slumped into the seat with a relaxed sigh. Well, that was about as subtle as an Elvis impersonator at a Vulcan funeral. Didn't suspect a thing, Mendez said. Course not, Buttons added. They were too busy flexing to notice we mapped half their systems on the walk. Ari pulled out a deck of cards. So, same plan? Tex nodded. Let 'em show off. Let 'em laugh. We'll be the punchline. Right up until we punch back. Coop adjusted Waffles, who was now gnawing on the edge of a metal bench. Hope they're ready, he said, because Waffles is hungry. The battle began with theater. The Vortani always liked their wars like they liked their diplomacy. Loud, flashy, and televised. From the orbital rings of the Valkar system, a wall of Vortani warships surged forward like a gleaming tsunami. They led with precision formations, mirrored shielding and plasma salvos that lit up space like an angry aurora. Commence suppression barrage, barked Sub-Executor Crix from the glorious judgment, his eyes gleaming as the first wave of energy blasts hammered toward the approaching human fleet. Let us teach them what real power looks like. To most observers, the Terran fleet looked like a scrapyard exploded and decided to fly in loose formation. Ships of all shapes, sizes, and designs lumbered forward, gray rusting hulls, some literally patched with mismatched plates. There was no elegance, just bulk scorch marks and a lot of antennae. They're not even holding formation, Crix hissed. They're panicking already. Aboard the Javelin, Captain Tex Harrigan lounged in his command chair with one boot up and the other tapping lazily to a country tune playing faintly on the overhead speakers. Y'all hear that? He asked, cocking his head. Think they're trying to tickle us. Mendez chuckled from tactical. Shields at full, but they haven't made a dent. Plasma's pretty, but it ain't got punch. They'll figure that out real soon, Buttons added, flipping switches like she was starting an old generator. Kinetic batteries are primed, on your word, boss. Tex picked up a half-empty coffee cup, sipped, winced. Still tastes like burnt possum. All right, let's give 'em a warning shot. The Javelin's hull shuddered, nothing dramatic, more like a deep, satisfied exhale, as 6 railguns launched tungsten rods at 10 kilometers per second. They were just hunks of metal. No guidance, no energy signature, no warning. On the Vortani, sensors they barely registered at all, until they hit. 2 enemy corvettes, one elegant and shaped like a scythe, the other glimmering like an insect, detonated in silence, shredded as if someone had taken a cosmic cheese grater to their hulls. No shields flared, no alarms screamed, they were just gone. What? Crix stood upright as alarms finally began to ring. What was that? What did they use? Object impact, no energy signature, a Vortani technician shrieked. Their weapons are primitive matter-based slugs. Crix's mandibles clicked. Impossible. Shields are calibrated to deflect high-energy beams, frequency-based pulses, and particle dispersion. The tech finished grimly. Not rocks, fast rocks. Back on the Javelin, Tex watched the screen light up with chaotic movement. Look at 'em scramble, he said. Coop, status? Waffles just woke up. Also, enemy formation breaking left. 4 cruisers trying to flank. Time to unscrew the pickle jar, Mendez said. Fire main battery, Tex ordered. A dozen more ships, sleek ones, boxy ones, one shaped like a shipping container, fired in staggered succession. No lasers, no plasma. Just a rain of rods, depleted uranium spikes, old-fashioned guided missiles, and coil gun salvos that moved too fast to track. Some missiles exploded into clouds of tungsten ball bearings. Others were just bricks of iron with propulsion. And they worked. Oh, did they work? The Vortani ships that tried to reposition were punched through like paper targets. Their shields didn't react, didn't shimmer, didn't even recognize the attacks as threats. Command ships twisted and split. Station hulls vented fire into the void, and elegant flagships burst open like overripe fruit. One Terran destroyer, the Rusty Hope, spun on its axis as it fired, shedding a panel and leaving it to drift. Seconds later, its broadside barrage cored a Vortani dreadnought. "Recalibrate the shields," Crix howled. "Adjust frequencies. Patch into Central Defense AI." "We can't," the tech screamed back. "They're using different velocities. Materials, angles, there's no energy signature to calibrate against. It's chaos." "That's the point," muttered another Vortani officer, too stunned to mask the fear. Crix stared at the battlefield. His fleet was unraveling. Thousands of years of military supremacy, undone by metal slugs thrown faster than sound. They knew, he said quietly. They wanted us to see our own weakness. They planned this. Back aboard the Javelin, Tex leaned forward, serious now. His crew, previously so relaxed, now moved with frightening precision. "Patch into open." "Channel," he said. "Channel open," Ari replied. Tex stood, his voice steady, cold. "This is Captain Tex Harrigan of the Terran Alliance. You mocked us. You flaunted your shields. You called us primitive." He let that sit for a second. "Well," he drawled, "turns out being primitive just means we never forgot how to throw." A punch. Across the void, Vortani ships began to run. Some simply powered down. Others overloaded in desperation. None had an answer. The humans didn't chase. Yet. They didn't need to. Their point had been made. Tex sat back down and exhaled. "Oops," he said with a grin. "That was our plan." Space was quiet again. Where once the Vortani fleet had cast a shimmering net of superiority across the system, now there was only debris. Twisted shards of hull plating, broken turrets, and the occasional floating, dignified chunk of a shattered command vessel. The Terran fleet, battered but largely intact, loomed over the carnage like wolves watching over a field of plucked peacocks. On the Javelin, Tex swirled the dregs of his coffee and finally gave up trying to pretend it didn't. "Tastes like motor oil, so?" he said, kicking his feet up again. "How long before we get the calls?" "Already flooding in," Buttons replied, scrolling through the interface with one hand and munching on something that might have once been a protein bar. "The Threxians want to enter a mutual weapon knowledge exchange program. The Calderans have offered 5-star systems for a railgun schematic. Oh, and the Yalaxi ambassador just sent a basket of fruit and a strongly worded apology." Tex scratched his beard. "They send the purple starfruit things again?" "Yup. Tastes like sadness and dish soap." Mendez leaned over from tactical. "And we just got a hail from what's left of the Vortani flagship. They're asking for, quote, honorable terms of surrender." Tex snorted. "They always get formal when they lose." Ari chimed in from comms. "Do you want to respond?" Tex stood up, stretching. "Sure, put me on. Full transmission." A beat. Then Ari gave him a nod. Tex stood at the center of the bridge, arms folded. The background behind him was deliberately unglamorous. Exposed piping, duct-taped paneling, a dangling mug labeled #1 Death Monkey. He stared into the camera like he was about to sell bad beer in a worse commercial. "To the Vortani sub-executor Crix," he began, voice deadpan. "And whoever's left still listening, hi, this is Captain Tex Harrigan. You may remember me from such moments as losing half your fleet in under 5 minutes and getting punched in the ego by Earth." He smiled without warmth. "You thought we were primitive. You laughed at our tech. You waved your shiny toys around, assumed we were cavemen banging rocks together. And now," he gestured out the viewport at the wreckage, "now you're realizing something important." Tex leaned in, voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "See, we are primitive, but deliberately, because we learned a long time ago that when you stop complicating things, when you stop trying to look impressive and start trying to win, you tend to do just fine." He straightened again. "So go ahead, tell your friends, humans don't fight fair, we don't fight pretty, we just win." That's what being Earthborn means. He gave a lazy salute and motioned for the feed to cut. The bridge was quiet for a moment. That was, Mendez said, blinking. Savage. I try, Tex replied. Do we share the railgun schematics? Buttons asked. Tex looked at her like she'd asked if they should auction off their underwear. Hell no. Ari grinned. Should I send the usual response? Yep, standard diplomacy kit. Buttons keyed it in. A zip file labeled Sample Railgun Tech. Inside, a looping gif of a honey badger tearing apart a snake, overlaid with bold Comic Sans text reading, Good luck figuring it out. Transmission sent. Tex returned to his chair and leaned back. You think they'll come back? Mendez asked. Oh, probably, Tex said. Someone always thinks they're smarter than the last idiot. Buttons twirled a stylus. And if they come with new shields next time? Tex's smile sharpened. Then we let 'em meet the next surprise. In the belly of the Javelin, locked behind a vault of rotating iron doors and quantum-coded security protocols, something pulsed with faint blue light. Not a railgun, not a missile, not kinetic. Something older, something darker, something Earth never needed to use. Not yet. Tex sipped his coffee again, grimaced. Seriously, this coffee's the real war crime.